Hello, dear viewers and listeners. I'm Monica Kuzminskaita. I'm health and nutrition psychologist, and this is my podcast that I call Spoonful of Reason. I'll start with simple but important thought. If you want to help people who are overweight, criticism will not be helpful. It will actually do more harm than good. If you really want to help, don't talk about weight at all. I'm sure everyone has enough knowledge and motivation. If you think that controlling weight is very easy, it is definitely not. And not thinking about the reasons will not make you right. And if you still want to criticize, then it's not about helping, but about wanting to humiliate another person, usually to elevate yourself. This is normal, we all do that, but every time you do it, it's worth thinking whether this is actually what you want to do. We will talk about overweight stigma. Stigma is a cultural phenomenon that manifests as intense, unjustified criticism of perceived deviation from the norm or evaluator's own perception. Being overweight is enthusiastically stigmatized. Of course, the negative medical consequences of being overweight are real, and this seems to legalize criticism of overweight people. However, essentially all conclusions that are grouped into the stereotype of overweight are fundamentally incorrect. Overweight people are not lazy, not unmotivated, undisciplined, nor uneducated. All that can reasonably be said when looking at an overweight person is that they are overweight. It is impossible to draw conclusions based on appearance alone, either about causes, including those beyond the person's control, or about the efforts made to manage the condition. Despite the obvious discrepancy between criticism and reality, the stigmatization of being overweight is so widespread that people being criticized begin to think that everyone cannot be wrong and that it must be true. Meanwhile, such thoughts promote chronic stress, which raises blood cortisol levels and C-reactive protein levels, creating conditions conducive to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as emotional eating and avoidance of physical activity. Studies show that perceived stress accounts for as much as 37% of the reasons linking the stigma of being overweight to negative psychological consequences. And this indicator is independent of actual body weight. In other words, the impact on psychological well being is not directly determined by body weight, but rather by emotional reactions to criticism. In research, stigma is divided into two categories. One is experienced stigma, actual criticism received from other people, bullying, ignoring, unfair discrimination, and anticipated stigma. This is tension when predicting critical behavior from other people in the future, causing constant anxiety, leading people to avoid situations where they will be physically visible and potentially judged, such as sports clubs, clothing stores, and medical facilities. Weight stigma can be internalized, which means that statements heard from others eventually become part of internal monologue through which we explain ourselves, our environment, and others. Internalized stigma is a significant cause of low self-esteem and often leads to development of eating disorders. Research also mentions structural stigma, a negative attitude embedded in institutional policies, laws, and broader social environment. Internalized weight stigma manifests itself in beliefs that overweight people are less attractive, less competent, less valuable than slim people, or that they are unsuccessful in life precisely because of their weight. It is these internal thoughts that are most significant factor in psychological difficulties, even more so than actual external discrimination and criticism. In a group of overweight women, internalized weight stigma accounts for as much as 40% of the causes of psychological difficulties. Being more overweight often means a greater impact on psychological well being. Unfortunately, being overweight is the most common cause of bullying among children, and the consequences of such bullying last for a very long time after childhood has passed. Sadly, more than half of adolescents say they experience pressure or bullying about their weight from their own parents. Even if parents Meanwhile, such conversations act as trigger for stigma-related stress and further encourage overeating, chronic dieting, and low self-esteem. The face of structural stigma in schools is the widespread belief among teachers that overweight students are undisciplined and have poorer academic abilities. Uh, and worst of all, structural stigma is also present in healthcare settings, where medical professionals believe that overweight patients function less well and are more likely to exhibit negative traits such as being lazy, not following instructions regardless of the actual situation. Such patients are more likely to receive unsolicited recommendations for unrelated conditions. The fact that patients may not have suitable chairs, measuring devices, or clothing really makes their relationships with doctors worse and their trust in them decreases. So, what can we do? First of all, the focus should be on health rather than weight. People who experience the consequences of weight stigma would benefit greatly from practicing self compassion, not self pity, not reinforcing the victim mentality, but recognizing their situation and possibilities and setting realistic goals. It is important to identify and strengthen healthy coping strategies, recognize and utilize a support system made of friends, family members, and specialists that are actually helpful and do not increase the load of criticism. It would be wonderful if doctors themselves set a positive example and focus most of their attention and recommendations on improving health indicators rather than concentrating on weight as a possible stressor. So, if you sincerely want to help an overweight person and are asked for such help, talk about health, suggest going for a walk together instead of eating, and avoid talking about weight altogether. If no one asks you for help with weight, you don't need to offer it. Try not to forget that criticism only makes the situation worse. And if you still feel the urge to mention weight, reconsider the real reasons behind it. People don't lack knowledge or motivation. That's all for this week. I'm Monica Kuzminskaite. I'm a health and nutrition psychologist. I write, I give lectures, and I provide psychological counseling. You will find the link to register for counseling session under each post, and you will find my posts on social media, searching either for my name or for keyword Spoonful of Reason. Wishing peace to you all.